It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've all read the headline. Xerox decides not to exhibit at Drupa. We all know that Drupa is this massive production print, industrial print, graphics print show held in Dusseldorf. It's held every few years. Last time they had this meeting was in 2016. The next meeting is May 28th through June 7th of 2024. Xerox had a big booth at that meeting, and guess what? They said, you know what? We're not going. And they canceled. And some of the analysts in the industry, they're all upset. Some of them are even trashing Xerox. They don't need to go. They haven't innovated in over 10 years. They're worthless, blah, blah, blah. Of course, these are the same analysts that were praising Xerox because they went last year. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes I really question our analysts. But at the end of the day, I think Xerox made the right decision. I want to share my thoughts on why I believe they made the right decision. And I also want to share some thoughts to the graphics and industrial print people. And I've been sharing some of these thoughts over the last few years, but I don't think it's sinking in. And I strongly suggest to all the people that are in the graphics and industrial print space, go to the OEMs that make that equipment's financials and read them. Don't live in a fantasy world. Read the financials of the players making this equipment. Read the financials of the people in the marketplace selling this equipment. Look at the percentage of revenue that graphics and industrial and label print brings these OEMs. Brings these major resellers like Xerox. And when you start looking at the numbers, you're going to start to realize it's a very low percentage. It's a very low percentage of their profit. And at the end of the day, we all know for a fact that the industrial and graphics print space is oversaturated. There's more supply than demand. And all of the demand that we do see is displacement demand. I've talked about this before. Think about all the print shops all over the world and go back 15 years ago. As those end users started to digitize themselves more and more, they went to these print shops less and less. And the volumes in all these print shops all over the world started to really decline. And these volumes declined so much that these print shops all over the world were allowed to buy equipment being manufactured coming out of Japan from the print OEMs that have been making business print. And we see folks like Konica Minolta and Ricoh, everybody's getting into the space, getting into the label space. But in all reality, all of that growth is displacement growth. The only reason that it's growing is because the volumes have dropped so low that the end users that were using the products can shift to lower cost, more affordable equipment. And of course, when you got everybody and their brother supplying the equipment, running around chasing this small percentage of market share, guess what? The prices continue to drop. The value continues to drop. And now we got ink. Ink technology getting into this space. Ink is going to cause so many problems to the status quo of the industry because ink is so less service intensive. Ink is going to change the game. Not only in industrial and graphic print, it's going to change the game in business print too. And the other thing I've been telling my friends in the graphics and industrial print space for a long time is when these OEMs that are making this industrial print equipment start losing massive amounts of revenue and profits from their business print and their Soho print and all the supplies that go with that, their core deliverable, they're not going to be able to dabble in these ancillary products and services that they've been screwing around with, that represent right now, in most cases, less than 5% of their total revenues. And I believe Xerox probably gets the most percentage of revenue in the big production space because they've been in it for so long. But in all reality, even Xerox is seeing it. They're seeing the decline. They're seeing the volume decline. They're seeing this shift in technologies. And at the end of the day, do they really want to spend a bunch of money to gather around with a bunch of print people talking about the relevancy of print? Or do they want to focus on other things? Because Xerox, like everybody in our industry, has to know this. We're going to sell people print equipment until they don't buy it anymore. We're going to sell them graphics equipment, industrial equipment, production print equipment. The problem is that they're going to use it less and less and less and less and less. The problem is that the technology is going to shift from laser-based to ink-based, causing a whole lot of problems for an industry that built its whole entire business model on fixing stuff that breaks and putting a bunch of parts and stuff. Those days are coming to an end. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to dig into this a little bit deeper, and I want to share my thoughts with you. So I read the press release that was put in Print Week, and this was Xerox's response to not coming to Drupa. Let me read that. A company spokesman told Print Week today, as our business continues to evolve, we remain committed to investing in our production print clients, partners, and prospects, but have decided not to exhibit at Drupa 2024. We thank the conference organizer for their years of support and for continuing to bring the print industry together. Print remains an important part of our business, and we will continue to support our network through thought leadership, Xerox-led global events, new product innovations, and client-centric trainings and demos. What Xerox is saying is this: we want to be more strategic about how we engage in the marketplace through marketing. We need to be more strategic. We need to talk to end users, share thought leadership around not only our print and our production print, but around how we're going to help them with AI services, how we're going to help them with IT services, how we're going to help them digitally transition. Ladies and gentlemen, Xerox realizes, do we really need to spend the high six figures to go to some show in Dusseldorf and hang around with a bunch of print people talking about the relevancy of print? Or do we need to be rifle focused and strategic in our marketing approach? Let me read a little bit more out of this article. Fujifilm, which at the last show was located next to the long-term partner Xerox, is currently located at the base of Hall 8B and appears to have taken extra space to support its much expanded portfolio since the last show. Fujifilm, we know that Fujifilm makes the Xerox stuff, right? We also know that Fujifilm's making stuff for Sharp now. I mean, pretty soon, you'll just be able to go to the Fujifilm booth and they can just have a representative from Sharp, from Xerox, probably from Ricoh, from whoever else Fuji decides to make equipment for. And they can all just tell the end users that show up at these events, yeah, it's all the same equipment, but I'll sell you ours with our name on it cheaper. And then the other person can say, oh, no, we're going to sell you ours with our name on it cheaper. Ladies and gentlemen, what's going to happen when all the manufacturing of all this graphics and industrial print equipment gets down to one or two manufacturers? And more importantly, what happens when it gets more ink? Better start thinking about it, because it's going to impact the graphics and industrial print space dramatically. Here's something else I read in this article, and I just thought it was comical. An industry source commented, the space that Xerox had is a prime position, and you could imagine that Konica Minolta and Fujifilm would be interested in all or some of it. Konica Minolta, are you kidding me? This is why I believe that the industrial print people and graphics print people have to read the financials of the OEMs. Konica Minolta has lost right at $1 billion over the last 3 years. Their last year, they lost $634 million. The first quarter of this year, they lost $30 million. Folks, these OEMs are not going to be able to stay in industrial and graphics print space when they're bankrupt. These OEMs are not going to be able to stay the way they are today in the graphics and industrial print space as they continue to lose revenue and profits from their business printing and their Soho printing and its supplies. It's just a reality. Let's talk about Xerox's numbers real quick. Last year, Xerox did $7.1 billion. This year, they're going to do $7.1 billion. The revenue's been flat. Flat's probably good in our industry right now. But ladies and gentlemen, Xerox has been producing 6% operating profit. Xerox has fiduciary responsibility, and they take it serious. If you look at the EMEA, for the first quarter of 2023, the EMEA did $570 million, 32% of the revenue. If Xerox does $7.1 billion this year in revenue, and the EMEA represents 32% of that revenue, it's $2.2 billion in total business in the EMEA. If industrial and graphics print, high-end stuff represents 5% of Xerox's revenue, that would mean in the EMEA they're doing about $110 million worth of revenue. What's it cost to go to that show? Maybe Xerox is just thinking, you know what, the people in the EMA are going to buy our equipment whether we go to that show or not. The only thing that's going to happen if they don't go to the show, the analysts that all loved them last year because they went will talk bad about them this year because they're not going. And what do the analysts really do at these shows? Ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you something right now. These shows are marketing gimmicks. That's what they are. The end users that show up at these shows and buy stuff would be buying the product anyway. Quite honestly, a lot of times, a lot of these vendors probably wish these end users didn't go to the show. Didn't go to the show and get the Dusseldorf discount. Maybe they'd be better off if they didn't have the show. There's got to be folks in the industry thinking that. Let's talk about Konica Minolta real quick, because this one's hysterical to me. I don't know what this consultant was thinking about. Maybe Konica Minolta will buy Xerox's booth. Maybe Konica Minolta will go buy Xerox. Here's what I'll tell you. Maybe Konica Minolta will actually go bankrupt. Ladies and gentlemen, industrial print business for the first quarter of 2023, Konica Minolta did $54.3 million. Do a run rate on that for a year. What is that, a $220 million business in industrial print? Their production print, they did $265.9 million. That's going to run at about $1 billion for the year. You really believe that Konica's a player in the space in industrial and graphics? What are they going to do, double the revenue? They're going to go from $250 million a year to $500 million a year? Hopefully they can make some money if they do it. Because if you look at the operating profit for the first quarter for Konica Minolta in the professional print space, and in the professional print space is where industrial and production print live, along with their marketing services, whatever the hell that is. But at the end of the day, they did $6.3 million or 2% operating profit. But the company also lost $30 million for the first quarter as a whole. And they have this category called corporate, etc., which I believe they dump a lot of those losses in. I also believe that when we saw their spike in the professional print business space from a profitability standpoint, the only reason they got that spike is because they had a bunch of embellishment equipment that had been written off that they put out in the marketplace. It was all profit. I brought that up in an episode. I said I heard it as a rumor, and I've never heard Konica Minolta deny that. So if the only way we're making money is that we have stuff hanging around so long that it's completely off the books and we go out and sell it and call it all profit, guess what? That's not a good business model. But ladies and gentlemen, when you look at these OEMs' financials, what you're going to determine, just like I determined it 4 years ago, is these OEMs lose revenue and profits from their core deliverable of business print, Soho print, and all the supplies that go with it. They are not going to be able to afford to be in this high-end industrial and graphic space. And we talk about labels, the growth in labels, the growth in labels. Yeah, there's growth in labels, but look at the label equipment itself. The label equipment itself is getting less and less expensive. More and more players. We just saw where Zebra laid off 700 employees, the largest label manufacturer in the world. Come on, Zebra. 700 employees laid off. You know why? Because they have too much supply versus demand. You know why? Because everybody and their brother started getting into the label business. There is potential in the label business, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, will the supply match the demand? Or will we have too much supply versus demand? And how will that affect the OEMs? Let me wrap it up with these couple of questions. Is Drupa more about vendors selling each other on print relevance or getting checks from end users? Seriously, you go to this thing in Dusseldorf, you got all these end users meeting with you, writing you checks. Then you got to ask yourself, well, they wrote us the check anyway. And if we didn't have it, if we didn't get the check in Dusseldorf, well, they wrote us a check for more money. Because we would have had less competition. What happens to the Drupa show when manufacturing consolidates? And I really believe this is the biggest pressure point for the whole entire industry. For the graphics and industrial and business print itself. The OEMs are going to start consolidating. There's probably going to be 1 or 2 players left. And at the end of the day, as the equipment moves more to more ink-based, that's going to change so much in its own right. But are we really going to go to these big, giant vendor shows when all the vendors are selling the same product with their name on it? Some things to think about, my friends, but Xerox, I believe you made the right decision. And everybody watching me knows this. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck at status quo, and I'll see you all tomorrow.